you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you here, Delilah.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited, and I know that there's a bunch of different things that you've done. So you're a member of the Folklore movement, a Salesian, and you've also done service work in Haiti. So I hope that you're going to be able to talk about that a little bit throughout our guest speaker portion. Before we start, I want to ask you if you can share 3 fun facts about yourself. They can be anything you like.
Okay, so I'd say that, well, it's kind of obvious. I speak fluent French. I'm also half Lebanese and half Italian, so I can understand both Arabic and Italian, which is pretty cool, I think. Yeah, so another fun fact would be I love the outdoors. If you want to go on a hike, I'll definitely be down. I'd go with you. I love to travel, those kind of things. And the last one, I'd say that I'm part of this very large and loud family, and I love them very much. So if you guys are watching, hey.
That is so cool, Delilah. Thank you so much for sharing the fun facts about yourself. I find it really cool that you can speak fluent French and understand Italian and Lebanese. It's a bunch of different languages, so that is very interesting. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to get straight into the questions. So what exactly does leadership mean to you?
Okay, so I know maybe some of you have maybe heard this before, but leadership really for me is not being afraid to like roll up your sleeves and getting to work, really. It's about not necessarily work, but service, and we'll see that later on in the talk. But it's guiding others, your friends, your family, and people in general towards a goal or a purpose while being creative and intentional through it all. It's really that as a sum up. You mentioned that, like, in a way, leadership isn't necessarily like being a manager, for example. It's definitely not that. You can think of it, some people like in this world would probably see it as that, giving people commands and whatnot, but really in the Christian lens, it's much more. So yeah, that's really leadership for me.
Perfect. Yeah, so leadership can be, as you said, like a bunch of different things. It's not necessarily about, being a manager and like micromanaging a team and always being in charge. It's about serving others, and as exemplified through Jesus, who's a prime example of a leader, being humble and serving others and loving others and helping others should be the prime, aspect of our leadership. All right, so now I'm gonna ask, what is service to others, and what does this have to do with leadership?
So service and leadership go hand in hand. They're not necessarily synonymous, so they don't necessarily mean exactly the same thing, but they can't exist without each other. You wouldn't necessarily see this kind of a definition if you search up the meaning of leadership in the dictionary, but in our Catholic teaching, social teaching, that's kind of what it is. Leadership and service go hand in hand. So I was going to say this Bible quote, but you beat me to it. I was going to mention about how Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew that, but among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader, you must be the servant. So imagine somebody today in our world saying that. That's revolutionary, really. It's completely the opposite. You would never, at least in the lens of this world, see that as the reality, but it is. And that's why it's revolutionary. It's because it's not of this world. What else can I say? I have notes here, so don't mind if I'm looking down. So leadership here, if you think about a leader, you often think of a president or maybe some leader of a nonprofit organization or whatnot, or maybe somebody who's accumulating a certain amount of power or honor or wealth. But really, being a leadership in Jesus' eyes is even to the point of self-erasure. Self-erasure means completely not necessarily not being present, but it's not going, like, the good deed that you did is not for you. It's for the person, you've done it, and it's for the glory of God. So it, as I said, it's revolutionary. It's hard to take in, but it's the beautiful truth.
Can you like kind of explain that Bible verse a little bit, because it does say to be a leader you have to be a servant, and like as you said, they're kind of like, you know, like stark opposites of each other. You don't imagine a leader being like a servant. They're two very different things. So how exactly, like how do you kind of, because I asked this at the very beginning of the broadcast, how do you kind of take that Bible verse? What exactly does it mean to you?
That's interesting. I mean, it's hard to understand. It's kind of one of those verses where you're like, that doesn't make sense at all. If I'm in a position where I'm in charge of a group of people, shouldn't I be at the top, right? Shouldn't I be, you know, telling people what to do and then they kind of follow along? That's kind of the logic, right? But Jesus really points out it's not necessarily the opposite, but when you are a leader, you need to have that in mind constantly, that you will be the one serving them, right? You're doing service towards them. I will speak about more in depth in a different example of Jesus in the Gospels, but I understand how it could be very difficult. Even I, you know, have a hard time understanding this. But imagine, you know, a leader on their knees, wiping your feet, for example, like as Jesus did, wiping the feet of his disciples. But it's like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around that Bible verse, right? Because being a leader, at least in the way that God wants us to be, is also being a servant as well. And even though they are kind of two complete opposites, that's the true essence of being a leader, is being able to be the servant also and serve others. All right, so now this is kind of a question for all of us here on the Catholic Student Leadership Impact Team. What does it mean to be a Catholic student leader? And how can we as students reach our full potential as a leader?
Right. So this is awesome, an awesome question. I wasn't a student too long ago, so I really relate with this question. I'll just kind of maybe share with you my experience that I did a few years back. So when I was in high school, I longed to go on mission. I wanted to go on mission outside of Canada. I wanted to get out of here. I wanted to, explore a little bit, get out of this, Toronto, see a new scenery. I wanted to, most importantly, meet the poor. Because, you've shown pictures of poor, especially for me, poor children would always hit my heart. And you feel like you need to do something. You want to be there, hands-on, doing some sort of tangible work. So I would always be searching for an opportunity, really to go on mission overseas. And in 2018, the opportunity did come with the Focolare movement. If you don't know the Focolare, you should really look into it. They're awesome. So I was able to go, and it shocked my parents. They didn't want me to go. Well, they let me, but they didn't want, right? Because I was the only young adult going with a group of a few other adults. And I knew no one. I kind of knew a few, but not really. And I was heading towards the eastern rural area of Haiti, right in between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So not necessarily in the cities, but I went up in the mountain, and it was a small village called Montorganisé, which doesn't have a lot of people, but it's pretty poor. And even I had to cross through the bigger city, and even there you see the poverty is very striking. So the main focus was I was trying to go and work with the poor, and I wanted to meet Jesus in them. So I would be constantly searching for opportunities to try and see, Jesus through other people. So I was missioning with the poor, as I said. I was giving them clothes and food, and we did community service programs. I was working with an adoption program thing with the kids, and most of the time I was making bracelets, with little girls, and like playing hopscotch or not hopscotch, that wouldn't work, but like basketball and things like that. But I saw a lot of like things that you don't see here necessarily, like kids crouching down on the street with just a t-shirt on, really, or like mothers bathing their children in the river, or like piles of of garbage in the middle of the street on fire, because that's how they dispose of garbage. They don't have, we're so great. I mean, I'm so grateful now for the garbage men out there, but they don't have that, so they burn them. They burn it. But so all these realities were really, really strong. And at one point, I didn't know if I was ready to see all this. But then I kept on feeling, I kept on remembering why I went on this mission and why it was important, and that kept me going. But at the same time as I saw all these things that are kind of scary and not really pretty to see, I saw a lot of dancing, I saw a lot of singing, saw a lot of, smiles and laughter, which in the end stays with me the strongest when I think about my trip in Haiti, when I look back on it. But then I think about, what difference did I make in Haiti? I'm pretty short. I'm a small girl. I don't really weigh a lot. How much difference could I have made in Haiti? My two hands didn't do much other than, teach some girls Chinese staircase with the strings, if some of you know that. Not much of a difference that the world could measure, right? But the difference did matter for the people that I was with those children, with those families that I spent a lot of time with. It did matter for them. And I definitely found Jesus in Haiti. I did. But then it came to the point where I realized that Jesus was also in Canada, that there were a lot of people here that I maybe wasn't noticing before. A lot of people that I could be a leader towards and of service to that I might have not paid attention to or even noticed that the need, right? So in the end, I realized that I didn't need to jump on a plane and cross the ocean, right? Do this big radical thing that scares my parents, to go meet Jesus and serve the poor. He's here and he is waiting for our love and our service through other people. So let me just try and go back on track here because I went a little bit on a tangent. So the people here may not be in direct need of clothing, for example, or of food or drink. Maybe some, but not most that you encounter in your day-to-day. They'd probably be looking for a phone call or like a "how was your day" text kind of thing, or like a coffee date. Stuff like that you can serve others through these little things that eventually accumulate to being having an impact on them, making other people feel loved. That's quite a mission. So that's kind of what it means to be a leader in the student sense. With over time, you become a leader in your profession or in your family life. But as a student, what can you do, especially in this pandemic situation? You can't really do, unfortunately, the mission trip as easily as it was in the past. But you should not be discouraged, because you can mission to the poor here in Canada, in Toronto, in Rexdale, wherever you are. There are people in need, and that person in need might be in your family. That person in need you might have their number on your phone, your friend. It could be a community member or somebody at church. We have to just know how to recognize and find these people. And, these are questions you need to ask yourself daily, right? But yeah, so.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. I just wanted to say, I like how you touched upon how, we don't have to fly across the world on a plane in order to make a difference and serve others. We can visit a homeless shelter. We can write a note to a seniors residence or a seniors age center. We can make a difference even in our school community. We don't have to while it's good to get experience and do service work, abroad, we can also make a difference in just our community here as student leaders. So I like that you shared that, Dalila. Thank you. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to go on to the next question. In the Bible, there are many stories in which individuals exemplify leadership by serving others. Can you touch upon one of these stories and explain its importance?
This is a beautiful question. There are so many examples of leaders in the Bible. One that I can think of now is just in the Old Testament. So many, but I'm thinking about Moses, how he led the whole chosen people, God's chosen people, through and out of slavery, out of Egypt. That's quite a feat. Really, that's quite a big job. Most of the time he had no idea what he was doing, which honestly, that's kind of our experience. We don't really know what we're doing most of the time, but we have confidence and we have faith, right? And also Moses felt like a failure a lot of times, right? Which we can feel quite a lot of that as well. But in the end, he completed his mission. And although he might have not actually have seen the chosen land, he didn't. It was later on Joshua who took that. But he did bring the people out of slavery, which is amazing. So he is one big leader that I think about. When I think about leaders in the Bible. But I mean, we already spoke about Jesus as the ultimate leader, but I was going to speak about him too, because he is really the number one example of a leader. You can't pass it. You can't sugarcoat. He was just the number one leader, right? So let me see here which verse I can kind of talk about. There's one in particular that talks about if some of you feel called to serving others very tangibly. There's the verse in Matthew where they're asking Jesus about, okay, what's going to happen in Judgment Day? Like, what am I going to be asked? You know, what's going to go on? And Jesus goes, For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. Naked, you clothed me. Ill, you cared for me. In prison, you visited me. And then they ask him, what, Jesus, since when did I see you, thirsty and I gave you drink? And where would I ever see you in prison and give you food But then Jesus says, I say to you, whatever you did for the least of my brothers, you do to me. So when us as Christians are missioning or serving towards others, we really need to understand that we're literally missioning to Jesus. We're loving God through others. And that's just, I don't know about you, Julia, but that just blows my mind every single time I think about it, right?
Yes.
We're encountering God, right? Other people, right? Yeah,
because as God said, what you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. So by serving others, we essentially we're serving God. And I really like that Bible verse, so thank you for sharing that as well. All right, so we have 2 more questions. How can we use our leadership skills to benefit the broader school community, or in an even bigger sense, society as a whole? So Pope Francis he spoke to young people at Panama for World Youth Day, and he was talking about this revolution of service. He really wants the younger generation and for young adults and for adolescents to really take up this revolution of service, right? You see so many problems in the world, so many big issues. You can't your mind is like so overwhelmed with everything that you feel like you need to fix. But whatever you can do now, today, as long as you keep on saying your yes in your little ways throughout, your life, that accumulates to something so big. And imagine if everybody does that. Imagine if, like you, Julia, me, if my siblings and the people across the street and your neighbors, everybody does their part in service, how much better the world would be and how much this revolution would really come to life, right? Through service. So you need to think about, where can you fit in this revolution? What kind of service can you be doing? How can you lead through whatever service you feel called to, or whatever you feel like you need to do to be part of the revolution? So ask yourself these questions. Maybe there's a person in your life, maybe there's a neighbor, whatever it is, you need to recognize it and then say your yes. And there was one comment in the chat I just want to touch upon that said, you don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to take the first step. And I think that's really important, because if we all, as you said, if we all take that first step, we can make such a big difference in this world, because we're all student leaders here with the common passion of leadership. So if we all take that first step, we can make an enormous difference, an enormous change in our communities, in society, in the world. All right, one last question. How can we serve God while serving others? You kind of said this a little bit before, but yeah, if you just touch upon that question one more time.
Yeah, so I mean, we spoke about it, but really Jesus is present in everyone, right? And once you become conscious of this reality, it changes everything. You see Jesus in the beggar across the street. You see Jesus in your coworker or your friend or an orphan that you just, you know, sometimes you adopt an orphan across the sea. You see Jesus in these people. You see them in your sister or whatnot, your brothers. And so that really changes the way that you approach your everyday. It just flips upside down. You're no longer looking at things through the surface of society. You're looking at it through the eyes of what would Jesus do, right? It's pretty awesome.
It really is, yes. Seeing the face of God in every individual, every child, every person is crucially important to serving others and being a leader. So before we let you go, Diana, sorry, not Diana.
Dalila, that's okay, no worries.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or close off with?
I'd like to just mention that being a leader is not reserved for the outgoing person. It's not reserved for the loud type, for the person who likes to jump around and make themselves known. It's also for the introverted, the quiet. I would say that I am an introverted person, and so every time I do something out of my comfort zone, it's like a big thing. But you can be a leader as well, and you are just as important as the extroverted type. Whatever shape that may, come out as, like whatever the way you lead comes to life, it's as valid, right? I would just like to also say that, I don't know if you know, but Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux, she is actually one of the patron saints alongside of Saint Francis Xavier for missions. But she never left her country. She never left France. She never actually left her convent. So if you think about it, how can you be, the patron saint of missions without having done much? It's because she did her little things every day in every even thought that accumulated, and then God rewarded her. And now she is the patron saint alongside St. Francis Xavier, who went far and wide across the oceans, right? You don't necessarily need to do the big things. It's the little things that accumulate, right?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dalila, for all of your wise words, all of your wisdom, and for being a guest speaker on Let's Talk Faith today. You were amazing.
Thank you for having me.
We all enjoyed it. If everyone can hype Dalila up in the chat and say a big thank you, because honestly, this was amazing being able to talk with you here today. And we are honored to have you as a guest speaker. Thank you so much, Dalila.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
See you next time.